Hello there. Well, yesterday, or the previous video, was supposed to be the last video on this topic of creating the witch's crock pot or cooking pot. But those poses are not working properly or as expected as a glorified accessory item, so that's basically a body part, is irksome, very irksome. So what we're going to do is use the bits that we've now created. So we created some textures yesterday, or in the previous video, with some smoke. And what we're going to do is just turn this. We're going to use some of these elements and basically turn it into just a standard furniture item. And hopefully that should mean the poses, the custom poses, will work properly. So that means we are going to turn the pot, which is currently just an accessory, we're going to turn it into a furniture item. So where's the... But that's what happens with... so it's number 18. So open that. So what we're going to do is we'll use this mesh, we'll import this or append, we'll append this into the furniture starter file and then create a standard furniture item from it. So it'll be floating in the air. That's the phrase I was looking for. It'll float in the air and the poses will just be standard poses. So what we can do then is, where's the furniture files? Furniture, there we are. So what's that called? That's called pot.mesh. So I have to keep an eye on that. So open the furniture starter file. So we've already got, actually let's just go back to that. We've already got the custom poses, so we'll pull those in from just to make sure that we've got the latest poses. We'll pull those in. Is it 18? Yes, so 18, version 18 is the one with the latest poses, so we'll pull those in as well. But let's get, oh no, we might not need to do that. Well, let's see. Right, so we want the starter file, furniture. Yeah, that was the right one. Furniture notes. So this is the standard furniture file. It's got everything we need to create basic furniture, and what we're going to do is drop in a couple of seat nodes so that we can add custom poses to the pot. So first thing we need to do then is append, file append pot, browse to it, and again, as with appending previously, the .blend files act as an archive, so we can double click on them and drill down into them as if they were a folder or directory. So we want object, and we want pot.mesh. There's pot.mesh, select, append, there is the pot. So we can hide. So we don't need that. It's brought in the armature. So select and delete. Let's create a new collection. So click on Scene Collection or right click, New Collection, Crock Pot. Move that to the top. So drag click or click drag, and then we shall move our pot mesh into that. That means that then we can hide ceiling, we don't need that, wall, we don't need that. What we want is a standard furniture template. So we've got our mesh and the root node that's always needed for furniture. Now for this to work, so we've already done all the meshing, everything's done. What we can do actually is let's replace the textures with the ones that we've now got. So materials, 1, 2, 3. So select our object, shading workspace. I will have to reset the view. 100, sidebar, 2500, 1. So we're going to load in the textures that we created. So pot lid, click on the file icon. So we're selecting the material, click on the file icon, and scroll down to pot lid. Was it that one? Yep. So that automatically updates. Select the crock material. Same again, file icon. Painted. Open. Oh, well, that's the crock. So that one should be that one. And then the pot. Open. So there's our pot. So that's just updating the materials with the textures that we created. So you select the material, that'll give you the appropriate image node. Just click on the file icon and then browse to wherever the image is that you want to replace the current diffuse, I guess it is, or the current map that's associated with it. So we've done that. Layout. Right, so to make this a basic furniture item, we don't need the cube, so we can just hide that. And what we have is the root node, and that's what latches on to the furniture nodes of furniture rooms. So for this, we have to do this slightly different. We have to do this a slightly different way compared to an accessory, because accessories use a skeleton, but we don't use a skeleton for furniture. We're using nodes, and those we have to connect to or link to directly using parent rather than an armature, because armature objects that we assign to the meshes don't work with nodes. So if we select our mesh, double check that the armature is still, it is there, so we can remove this. We don't need it. And instead what we want to do is select the mesh, then shift click the node. So the node should be selected last, so it highlights a brighter orange. Then object, parent, object, object, parent, object, and then we'll get this little pop-up or overlay, and we want to set the type to object, and then make sure keep transform is set. What that means is that we can select the node and it'll move our pot. So that's step 1. Step 2, mesh selection again, object properties, object data properties I should say, and we just want to change attachment root and just call that root. So double click, delete attachment, root, just make sure that that's assigned to everything. So select all, assign, and then we can test. So let's just do a quick save on this, save as, and this is $25. So what we could do at this point is a quick FBX test. We can save this, excuse me, we can save this and test it. It's an FBX file. So select the mesh, then the root node, file, export, FBX, and similarly to our accessory, we have the dialog or the Blender file view window. So we want selected objects, everything else is okay. Geometry, that's all right. Armature, again, always disable. Add leaf bones, no animation, so we can disable that. File name is okay. File location is okay. Export FBX. So IMVU, drive new product, rooms and furniture, furniture. Go. So we're going to replace the chair. So FBX import, load FBX. We're still in the accessories folder, so we should have, what is it, 25. Open. And because this is a furniture item, it'll generally load the file it looks like it disconnected. Oh. That was weird. OBS went a bit doolally for a second there. So it'll, as an FBX, as a furniture item, it'll load it straight into the importer, so we don't need to go through all that skeleton selection stuff. So for this, disable rename room nodes, apply scale 0.01, mesh ID is 0. It's brought in our materials for now. We're going to add to this because we're going to add our Steam. Then we can import blah de blah material overview, overriding, import changes, then apply changes, and there is our pot with our texture. So let's make this double-sided, two-sided, two-sided. So there we have the pot. So that's a basic furniture item. Oh, YouTube has lost its connection, so hold on a second. Oh, Restream is saying we're offline, so hold on. I have to stop the stream and restart. It's a good job this is being recorded. Okay, back up and running. Glitch of streaming. Anyway, so smoke or steam. So what we're going to do is just add some steam effects to this, and we're going to use the technique that was discussed in the previous video. So all we're going to do, select our object. Where's the snap cursor to selected? So we get the cursor appearing at our object. What we're going to do is add mesh plane. Where's our plane gone? Is that super tiny? Yes, it is. Super tiny. Okay, so we're going to have to scale this out quite a bit. $200. Right, so yesterday we looked at this, or in the previous video. So all we're going to do is basically repeat the process. So we've added a plane. In fact, what we could do, let's add a material to this. So that's going to be our steam effect. So we're going to add a new material. We've already got 0, 1 and 2. So this is going to be material 3. Space, square brackets 3, close square brackets. Go into shading workspace. We'll just set up the material. So texture, image texture. Drop in the node, open, scroll down to our Steam image, so Steam TGA, and drag color output, base color input. Let's get rid of the specular, we don't need that. So to make this transparent, so this is a very basic transparency that IMVU will understand when we import the texture. So what we can do is add another image texture, drop that into place, and we can use the same image so we've got our steam texture applied to our mesh, we can use the same image as our opacity mask or opacity map. So click on the browse icon and then find our image, which is steam.tga. And what we can then do is drag color output, click drag, and drop that onto alpha input. Nothing will happen yet. And what we can then do is go into the material properties, make sure our object, yes, it says steam is selected, and then what we want to do is change the blend mode. Blend mode, alpha blend, and there is our steam. We can see the croc through it. Don't know how clear that will come through on the video, but that is our steam effect. So what we can do now, layout, we can do some editing. So let's duplicate this twice. Object, duplicate objects. Move that out of the way for now. And again. Let's enable wireframe so we can see this. So object properties, viewport display, wireframe, wireframe, wireframe. So what we want to do is drop this into our crock pot. And then edit the mesh, scale these together so this gives us the impression of our steam disappearing. Add a couple of, come on, tool, there we go, loop cuts. So click drag slide, click drag slide, and then one down the center, click. Then what we want to do is manipulate this. Let's go into solid mode so we can see this better. All we want to do is some basic manipulation of the mesh. To fit the shape of our object. So we don't want this quite to be as hard as that, so whoops. Because what that does is it makes it look, when the texture is scrolling, it'll make the texture look as if it's animating up the curve like that. So that's one. This will be two. So same again, edit mode. loop cuts, yoink, yoink, and then one in the middle. Scale these together. Whoops. And then just change the shape. So we want the handles. Where are those? There we go. And we want overlapping cards. So we want the cards to overlap so that it doesn't look overlap and twist. So we break we want the illusion of something that's occurring naturally. So that can be number 2. And then for number 3, whoops. Edit mode. Loop cut. Whoops. Click, drag, slide. Click, drag, slide. And then one in the middle. Rotate. Rotate. Scale those together. So it looks like a bit of an intersecting mess, but we actually want that. So this might be difficult to see in Blender. But if we then export this, and that's the preview, let's get rid of that shininess on these. That is. Right, so that's our pot. So we'll export this and do another test. So file save as 26. Join everything together. And the pot. Join. Make sure that everything is selected and assigned to our vertex group. So root, assign, just do a test, then try a test export. So select export FBX. This is number 26. Selected objects, that's alright, that's alright. Disabled, export. IMVU. Create, new product, rooms and furniture, furniture. So the default chair again, we're going to override, so FBX import, load FBX, it's number 26, open. So again, mesh ID 0, replacing the chair, apply scale 0.01, and disable rename room nodes. So we've now got our extra Steam material. So we can import this, override the defaults, and there is our pot with Steam. Let's double side that. And the pot lid. And the smoke, or the steam. Although that's two-sided by default. And then we can animate this. So, texture animation. We want scrolling. Turn it on. And then we want direction to be set. Let's do 1 and 0. So there is our steam or smoke effect. And of course, because we're dealing with transparencies, we have to consider the weird clipping issue that occurs because of what's called sort order rendering. So this face is being drawn on top of this face, and the transparency the transparency information that's included in this face is not being considered when this face behind it is being drawn. So we end up with this weird invisible clipping effect. So that's our steam effect. So what we can do now is add our custom poses. So back into Blender. Now for this, so let's reload the... Right, so we just want to make sure that these individual objects, vertex group, root, assign, vertex group, root. So we don't necessarily want to be joining all the objects together from the get-go. Because we might want to make some adjustments to that. So let's just save that. Save as right. For the poses, we have to do something a little different with our furniture item, because the poses are both in the same spot. So what we have to do is set up our seat nodes so that, because we already have the poses made, what we have to do is make sure that the seat node, where the avatar actually appears, is positioned at the center of the grid. And what we'll do is differentiate between the two of them. So we've got two poses. We'll differentiate between the two of them by changing the position of the handles. So we can move those off to one side so that the item is usable. Otherwise the two handles would be in the same spot, which might be somewhere here. So we'll use the standing and the sitting. Doesn't really matter which ones we use for this because they're both custom poses. So what we're going to do is just grab the large node of the group. So we have our sitting group and our standing group, and each one of them is comprised from the seat node, which is the large one, the handle, then the catcher and pitcher. So seat node, handle, whoops, catcher and pitcher. And then of course we've got the dummy that represents the avatar. So to move them, all we want to do is just grab the big seat node and just move that into position at grid center, like so. And what we can do in this particular instance, although don't know if it'll actually resize the whole group. No, there we go. We can actually resize it. This just makes it easier to spot because the root node and the seat node are both the same size. So that's all we need to do for that. Then what we can do is grab the handle, just move that off to one side. Oh, it looks like the scaling's set to. Need to change that. Always change that. Click grab, move that to one side. Do the same thing with the standing spot. Move that into position. And again, because it's the same size, what we can do is change the size of this as well. So let's make this 85. So we have sitting seat node and standing seat node. So for custom poses, oh, and also let's grab that, move it to one side. For custom poses, we now need to seat 01.sitting. We need to change the append, the sitting label, and call that something unique. So crockpot 1 or crockpot 01. Same for standing. Crock Part 02. So that identifies those two nodes as being unique. We don't need to do anything else in this particular instance, but if we had a number of seats, we just need to make sure that the seat 01 and seat 02 labels are incremental. So if there was another 2, we'd have seat 03 and seat 04, and then appended our unique append crockpot. So let's just do one other thing. Capture picture. So that's those two. Let's move those to one side. And then move these to one side. Move them as a unit. And then the final step, let's save this before we do that. Is to join these parts together. So select all the nodes. Seat, seat, and then lastly, root node. And then what we want to do is parent these. So object, parent, object. And we want to make sure in this particular instance, type is set to object and keep transform is set. If we watch what these nodes are doing, that's why we use keep transform. If it's not set, Blender ignores their position and resets them back to their defaults before everything is joined together. So what we should now have, selecting the root node, just press the G key, everything will move with it. So of course the smoke hasn't because we haven't joined that yet. But that's what we're looking for. So in fact, let's just join the smoke. So now everything moves. One thing we can do with the smoke actually is UV editing. We have to reset the view again because of the scale difference between IMVU and Blender. What we can do, so select our face, select more, make sure we can see the image, so we want steam as our steam effect. So what we can do, because they all scroll the same, so to avoid that, what we can do is select the UV map and just offset it. Don't have to do it to all of them, but we just need to do it enough that we create the impression that they are all moving at different rates. So there's that. That's a little trick. So layout. So we're about ready to export this. So let's just save again. You don't need to save this many times, but right, so export. So select everything, select all, select the root node last. So make sure we've got all the nodes. We can include, depending on how big your file is, but we can include the dummies because we can deselect those on import into IMVU. So file, export, FBX. This is 29, that's all right. Selected objects. That's okay. I leave bones disable and no animation, so disable and export. So IMVU, create, derive new product, rooms and furniture. Furniture. So FBX import, load FBX. 29. So it's brought in everything, including the helpers, so we can disable those. Just select them and it automatically disables all the materials because we don't need those. All we want are our crockpot materials. So mesh ID 0, disable rename 0.01, double check, and then import, override, apply changes, and there's our crockpot. And we've got our handles on either side. So currently they're just default poses. So it's the same spot. Oh, and of course we've got the transparency thing. So now we should be able to just import the poses that we created previously straight into the file without actually doing anything, because the pose file or the FBX is exactly the same for the furniture item as it is for an accessory, as it would be for an actual pose action. So there's no difference in terms of what you produce in Blender. Where is it? So there's no difference in how the pose is created and what's exported from Blender as a pose file. The difference is just how that information is then utilized in IMVU. So load FBX. We want number 18 for this. That'll give us the no meshes message, which is what we want because we're just importing actions. Import changes. It's kept the scale because we're importing into a new project. And there are, whoops, there are our two poses. So we can disable these two, we don't need them. Plot 1 and plot 2. Then import changes, and this will mess up the furniture item because we've imported another skeleton. So we have to go into config and reset the furniture item, which will be root node. Whoops. That one at the bottom. Apply. And then we've got our seat nodes back. Which seem to be positioned in odd places again. But we'll see. So action. So for this we want stance dot crockpot 01 avatar, new ensemble, select our pose, loops 0, loop start, loop end, so frame 1, frame 2, so we're creating a static pose. Replace, disable gaze, and then apply changes. So this should get us our pose. So there's the first pose. Then create another one. Add. So this is stance dot crockpot 02. So remember that these are case sensitive. So it's uppercase C. That goes for in IMVU and in Blender when you are changing the name of these nodes. The first letter in the append is always uppercase. After playing, same ensemble, pose number 2, replace, disable gaze, infinite loops, frame 1, frame 2, apply changes, and there is our second pose. And that is our furniture item. So let's just finish up. Two-sided, on, scrolling, and it was 1 for that, 0 for that. Can't quite see it there, but the scrolling is slightly different. But what we can also do so that's pose 1. So that's what we should have been seeing. For this. And the other one so that was pot 1, so this is pot 2. So that's what IMVU does when it doesn't properly override the poses when we create the glorified accessory items. So accessory items with basically glorified body parts, because the poses that we create and add don't necessarily override the defaults, even though everything is set up to do that. So we have disable gaze set and replace set. It doesn't always do it. So there is our crockpot furniture item with our custom poses. But one last thing that we want to do to our crockpot, edit, make sure we are selecting one of the smoky, steamy things. So select more or less, make sure that we've got one selected. What we can do, we've got 4 assignments of this material, and what we can do is click that. Oh, we can't do it whilst we're in edit mode, of course. So object mode, now we can do it. So we want another 2 instances of this same material. So click that. Oh no, that's not done it the way that, hang on then. So let's just 3. So what we can do is, yeah, we'll have to do it the other way. So what we want to do, create 2 more instances of a material, and we can assign these to our selection. So either one, assign, so it'll go white. Let's do another one. Select, more or less. So has that selected everything? No. So select the other one, assign, so that's gone white. So what we can do now is browse our material slots and assign Steam 3 to that, but we should be able to rename that for, nope. This is where material management comes into a bit of a pain, because you can't, if you have multiple instances of a material being used, it has a user. So if there are 4 instances of that material being used on 4 elements or objects, that's 4 users. But you can't, although you can assign materials, you can't do, whoops, so this is 3. So that can now be changed to 4. What we want to do is change that and make it unique, so then we can change that to 5. So you can't do that in edit mode. You have to be in object mode to do that. So what we basically did was created unique copies of the original material, which we then assigned to each. So we've got 1, 2, each of the Steam things, planes. But duplicating materials and sorting that out has to be done in object mode, not edit mode. So you have to keep toggling back and forth between the 2 modes to sort that out. But what this means is that we can now, even though it's using the same images, that's a complicated way of doing things sometimes, but that's Blender for you. So what we can now do, let's select everything, make sure root node is last, export, number 30. Selected objects, geometry, armatures, disable, disable. Because what that then allows us to do, rooms of furniture, furniture. Do this with a separate file so we can see this clearly. Load FBX. Disable, disable, 0, 0.01, disable. So now we have all our materials and the extra 2 steam materials, because what this now means is import changes, apply changes. We can now, let's turn this on for all 3. Let's just do a dramatic. Scrolling, scrolling, scrolling. And what that should be doing, which it doesn't appear to be doing, is scrolling each of the materials at different rates, or it should be animating it. Can't quite tell if it's actually doing that or not. Doesn't look as if it is actually doing that, but that's what it should be doing. Oh, IMVU started to mess around. So IMVU is mucking about. So we should be getting the apply changes button appearing at the top there, but it's not doing it. I think it might have got its knots in a twist when the connection got disrupted earlier. But what it does do is that it scrolls the textures at different rates, so we can have a different steam effect for each material. And then of course all we need to do is set up the poses so stance dot crockpot 01. We haven't brought in the file yet, but we can set up the action. Apply stance dot crockpot 02. Disable gaze. So what we can now do is import the pose file 18, no meshes, 0.01, import changes, apply changes, and of course that messes up the skeleton, so we have to go into config, reset the furniture item. That gets us our nodes back, so we can see the default pose. So now crockpot 02, and crockpot 01, And there we have our two poses. Oh, come on, IMVU. Honestly. This is the point where offline one would be cursing profusely. So what we would end up having is the two poses. So there's pose 1, there's pose 2. So we can access them by the handles that are offset that we created in Blender. So there is our crock pot as a furniture item with the poses properly displayed. So as if by magic, there it is. Right, so all that would be needed next is obviously to do your artwork and then upload to the catalogue. Oh, what happened there? Oh, yeah, so the two poses will appear, but obviously IMVU's got its nuts and bolts in a twist. Crock pot furniture. So, yes, that is our crock pot. It's an accessory with poses, and a furniture item. And we've basically used the same components, but for different projects. So we've used the same mesh for the pot itself and the same poses of the armature. So that definitely is the last video on this crock pot, because we've covered quite a lot of subjects. So thanks for watching, watchers. Thanks for lurking, lurkers. Do all the usual subscriptions and pressing the buttons and the things depending on what platform you're using. I'll upload the full recorded version of this without the interruption that we had earlier. And we shall call it quits there and see you on the next video. So, bye for now, everyone.